You see these four pieces of fruit? Of all eligible voters in America, these two represent voters, these two represent non-voters. If I give Taylor one of them, would you say that I gave her the majority of the fruit? No, probably not, but we'll get back to that in a minute. According to the United States Election Project, just under 140 million people voted in the 2016 general election. That's just over half of all eligible voters in America. But what does that actually mean? It means that when you see a party or a candidate coming into power because they won the, quote, majority, that term is wildly inaccurate. Hillary Clinton won the majority of the popular vote in 2016, right? But she won half of a half, which ends up being 26% of all eligible voters, or about one apple. The point I'm illustrating here is this, is that a representative republic is based on a representative majority. But when almost half of the people that can vote don't vote, then the concept of a true majority simply doesn't exist anymore. Whether non-voters would like to think so or not, both voters and themselves heavily influence the state of our political system. And they're shaping your lives as they are today and how they're going to be for years to come. Now, for the last 15 years, I've had a serious interest in politics, and I've had countless conversations during that time with people across the ideological spectrum. And I always want to find an understanding of why they think or feel the way they do about serious issues regardless of their party affiliation. Using these conversations and hard data from elections, I'll give you a few reasons why people vote and why some do not. And then after I give you these reasons, I'll pose some questions to you and find out how you see yourself in the voting process. So how does 26% become the majority of anything? Whether you participate in our democracy through your action or your inaction, there's one demographic that is defining our country according to their wants with their very active participation in voting. 0.4%. That's the difference between Ohio's 65 and older crowd and its 18 and 19-year-olds, or 18 to 29-year-olds. A mere 37,000 people in a state with 8.7 million is a statistically negligible number. That is, until that fraction of a percent turns into 10% more of them voting in the 2016 election than 18 to 29-year-olds. That's just in Ohio. It's at this point that people's reasons for voting literally got turned into laws, and tax cuts for the rich, and military spending, and Supreme Court justices, and cages for immigrant children. So what are these reasons? When speaking with my 66-year-old godmother, she's always voted because it gives her a sense of community. Her generation has always understood it as something you just did, and she feels like it's her responsibility to vote. As for my 76-year-old father, he thinks that conservative values are good for our country, so he votes almost purely along Republican Party lines and uses their recommendations for ballot issues. So, personally speaking, I vote for a variety of reasons, but they all culminate to one idea: that cultural progress can only be achieved if we constantly reevaluate our moral and ethical compass. And our government has to be an accurate representation of that progress, lest we remain stagnant in our endeavor for a better tomorrow. Now, I recognize that the idea of progress, or what a better tomorrow looks like, is subjective. But if we put the interests of the whole above all else in a pragmatic and inclusive manner, then we can get closer to the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for all Americans. In his famous essay on liberty, John Stuart Mill speaks to and warns about the, quote, tyranny of the majority as an oppressive force on the minority. But why do 74% of voting age Americans, the actual majority, consciously give control to this comparatively small group of people and control over everyone's lives? Non-voters will have a long list of answers to this question, but I've come across a few common responses. My vote doesn't count. That's a common perception that a single vote does not have a significant influence on elections results. And statistically speaking, this isn't exactly wrong, but because every single vote contributes to the total, you can't have a total without every single vote. So think about Taylor. Do you think she would have been able to catch an entire bushel of apples just as easily as she caught that one apple? I would think not. All the choices suck anyway. It's another common reason. Understandably, if you feel like you're being forced to choose between the lesser of two evils, then it's easiest just to abstain from making the choice altogether. Though it's important to remember that one of them will be elected, so abstaining won't prevent the less desirable candidate from winning. It just puts the control and the decision in a small voting block, in the hands of a small voting block. And what they think may or may not agree with your idea of what a good or bad candidate looks like. Lastly, voting can simply be a pain. From restrictive voting laws to an antiquated ballot system, there's a barrage of campaign ads leading up to the election, and the entire process filters out large groups of people along the way. So with just the undeterred citizens left to vote, they become the voice for all of us, whether what they say with their vote speaks for all of us or not. So individuals are both driven and discouraged by the U.S. voting system. I presented a handful of reasons why some people vote and why some do not, but it's not an exhaustive list. So I invite you to openly discuss your thoughts on voting and honestly answer a few questions. First, whether or not you'll be voting, why is that? Second, how do you feel about others' reasons for voting? And finally, what do you think can be done to make voting more appealing?
I feel like people's reasons for voting, like my vote doesn't count. My mother has personally always said that to me. She says, I don't vote because, for one, I don't want to deal with jury duty. And for two, because it's just one vote. How is that going to help? And I'm like, but if you vote, then Dad's going to vote, and then Devin's going to vote, and then I'm going to vote, and then you spread the voting around because, oh, if she's voting, I'm going to vote too. And I think that's a good way. If you start voting and tell people how important it is, then that's a good way to spread it.
Well, I like that, yeah. Thanks. Not all at once, it's fine. Amanda?
I personally always have voted since I turned 18, and I feel it's really important just because, you know, as Americans, we have people that fought for these rights for us, and there are a lot of people in other countries who don't get this experience at all that would die for it. Right. So I think it's pretty selfish, honestly. I mean, I understand everybody has their reasons, and not to cast judgment, but when there are people going to polls and dying in other countries, it's pretty selfish as an American to not vote, I think.
Sam?
One of the main reasons I am voting this year is because my grandpa, he's so, like, about it, and I'm scared he's gonna, like, shame me, or, like, he's just, like, everyone needs to vote. Like, so that's one of the main reasons.
They're like, yeah, Grandpa, I voted.
Yeah, he's very, like, everyone has this right, but not everyone has this right, and you do, so you need to actually use it.
Time?
I've always voted too, since I've been able to, and because I feel like it's like your job as an American to vote, because we're a democracy and that's what our country was founded on. And the people who don't vote tend to be the ones who complain, and they shouldn't be complaining if they didn't care enough to vote for something that they could have stopped if they voted for.
That's fair. Yeah.
I don't vote. It's not like I want to, it's just I never take the time to go to it, which sounds really bad. And I could do absentee ballots, but I'm registered to vote where I grew up, not here, and that's like an hour away. So it's just like crazy for me to drive through there. I've never been interested in politics. It's never been that one thing that I'm gonna go do because I want to. And when it comes to bigger things and more things that I'm interested in, I see and I want to vote, but now it's just like I'm just not interested in it.
It's hard.
Yeah.
Anna, last question?
I can't stand. My grandma is very involved in it, and she believes strongly in it, so I vote.
Shame if you don't, right?
I do have a question for you.
Can I complete and then, but thank you for your lightning feedback. I'm sorry we couldn't get to that, but we can chat a little bit later. As a group, we discussed your thoughts on voting after I presented a few reasons as to why our voting process engages some and not others. And for better or for worse, their engagement drives our democracy in the direction they want. So if you don't vote, you don't think like the tomato, and yes, certainly I don't identify with the apple. In the world of politics, you don't matter. So certainly the Avalon Tomato understand it. So we'll see you at the polls. Thank you.